It's often known that we have a process to manage product development, but we have no process to manage customer development. Your fix to this is to build a customer development process. Again, can you please give us some insights about that?
Sure. The customer development process basically says, again, there are no facts inside the building, and what you really need is to organize your thoughts about the startup. And what we now believe is that every startup, every large company, in fact, every company, has implicit in it a business model. Now, it used to be you'd get 3 professors in a room, and then you'd walk out with 12 definitions of what a business model is. Over the last couple of years, we've now kind of standardized, at least here in Silicon Valley, that a business model is the one that's described in Alexander Osterwalder's book, Business Model Generation. He says, look, any startup, you got 9 things you need to worry about. What are you building? That is, what are you offering customers? We call it the value proposition. What's the service or product? 2 is, who are the customers? Oh, good, we ought to figure those out. 3 is, how are you going to reach those customers? What channel? Is it direct on the web? Are you going to have a sales force? How are you going to create demand? He calls that customer relationships. And then, what's your revenue model or pricing strategy? Then, do you have any partners? Do you need any key resources? Do you have any special activities you need to do? And then, what's your expense model? These 9 boxes are the first step that we suggest that any entrepreneur needs to do. And we call this extracting your hypotheses. That is, hypotheses, by the way, are a fancy word that we use at Stanford and Berkeley because students pay a lot of money. But outside the building, it's actually called guesses. So we're actually going to now make you take all your guesses, write them down, put them up on a whiteboard, and stare at them for a while. And in the old days, that's all we would do, because then you'd go back and code. But we now know that all you have are guesses. So we take all those guesses, we let you keep writing what we call the minimum viable product, that is the first core piece of what hypothesis you want to test about your product, and then you get outside the building and you start testing each one of the business model hypotheses with a formal process called customer development. And that customer development process is, again, the core of what the 4 Steps to the Epiphany, the book about that testing process is. And what this does is just eliminate tens or hundreds of the early mistakes most startups make. Because implicit in that customer development process is 2 or 3 key ideas. One is this thing I alluded to before called the minimum viable product. Instead of building the entire product, shipping it, and getting customer feedback, we now say, no. Build the smallest unit of something that will get you feedback or orders, or you're looking for the smallest thing you could do. Maybe even get the website up and see if you could get people to even push a button that says, push me, right? Just to test whether you could get them. Then the second key idea is this notion of a pivot. And a pivot is really a startup-centric concept that says, do you know, in startups, we don't actually go from success to success like a big company. We actually go from failure to failure. If you actually think about how startups really work, what people never told each other, is that most startups aren't succeeding most of the time. They're actually running a series of, in the past, unconscious experiments. Now we're just going to make them conscious. And we're going to say, listen, we want you to try this, and don't worry if it fails. We'll just know that it's going to fail, but we're going to learn from every one of them. And so we do a series of hypothesis tests, most of them which aren't right. So we'll either iterate, which means slightly change, or pivot. And my definition of a pivot is when we substantively change one or more of our business model components. And the way we get to a pivot is we get a lot of customer feedback, and no customer says you need to pivot. It's the data comes back to the entrepreneur, and if they're great, they will extract an insight, and it will be one of these moments where you go, oh, this is what they're trying to tell us. What if we actually talked to a different customer? What if we did freemium versus subscription? Or what if we did something else? That's when those pivots happen. And then the third piece is speed. That entrepreneurs are all about fast and rapid testing and iterations and hypothesis testing and etc. Speed eliminates cash burn, or at least dramatically compresses the amount of cash and time you need, which is the enemy of startups.
So if you were to name a few companies in the tech space right now who are doing that?
To me, the best examples are Groupon and Zynga. I mean, Zynga is just a machine in iterating on customer feedback. And Groupon essentially started with a customer development process.